Beautiful, but deadly. South Africa, one of the most beautiful countries in the world, with one of the highest crime rates. A dream tourist destination. But if you're not careful, you might get caught up in the wrong areas, and things can get dangerous real fast. Crime is evident in all countries, from pickpockets in Europe to cartels in Mexico. But South Africa has its own flavors. And today we look at the gang-controlled areas to avoid and what crimes to look out for. We start in Johannesburg, South Africa's economic hub, known for its vibrant culture, its bustling streets, and, unfortunately, its violent crime. But unlike Cape Town, where well-established, structured gangs like the Hard Livings and the Americans rule the streets, Johannesburg's criminal landscape is more fragmented and fluid, often organized around specific types of crime rather than fixed gang structures. Instead of long-standing traditional gangs with their own rituals, codes, and hierarchies, the city is home to what we might call crime groups. Take, for example, the infamous Rolex gang. This group doesn't even call themselves a gang. In fact, they don't have a formal name at all. What they do have is a reputation for robbing unsuspecting victims of their expensive Rolex watches. These thieves often target people in upscale areas or even in public spaces like restaurants, parking lots, or busy streets. They might work alone or in small groups, but over time, they've earned a reputation because of the type of crime they commit. Victims are often shocked by how quickly the theft happens. The Rolex gang typically targets high-net-worth individuals or anyone with expensive watches on display, often in areas like Sandton, Rosebank, and even public parks or markets. Their MO is fast and efficient. They follow their target, pick their opportunity, and strike. Armed with weapons, they overpower victims and force them to hand over their watches. But once they make their mark, they vanish, leaving behind only the crime that earned them their name. But there are also more dangerous groups operating in Johannesburg, gangs that are far more organized and violent. The most ruthless is arguably the cash-in-transit gangs that target security vans transporting cash. These robbers are often armed with AK-47s and heavy weaponry like plastic explosives, blowing up the vans to get to the cash inside. One of the most notorious of these groups is the 28s. These are prison gangs, originally formed behind bars, with deep roots in the country's penal system. The 28s, along with the 26s and 27s, make up what's known as the Big Four, a collection of powerful prison gangs that run some of the most violent criminal enterprises in the country. Each of these gangs has its own structure, codes, and rituals. The 28s, for example, are known for their discipline, with members expected to follow strict rules. They're involved in a wide range of activities, from drug trafficking to extortion and even murder. Their influence stretches far beyond the prison walls, and they've been responsible for much of the violence and intimidation seen in Johannesburg's townships. These gangs, especially the 28s, are most active in areas like Eldorado Park, Westbury, and Deep Kloof. But while they have the structure and the power, they aren't the only threat to Johannesburg's residents. In fact, some of the most dangerous criminals aren't even part of these traditional gangs. Take the zamas, for example. These aren't technically a gang, but rather a loose term used to describe people working illegally in mines. The name zama itself is a Zulu word meaning to try or to take a chance, a fitting description for these miners who risk their lives in dangerous, often unregulated conditions. But zamas have gained a reputation for being heavily armed, especially since they often clash with police, security forces, and even other criminals over territory. The zamas are known to operate in the abandoned mines and mine shafts on the outskirts of Johannesburg, particularly in areas like Krugersdorp and Rudeport. These miners aren't just trying to make a living, they're also engaged in violent turf wars. Armed with AK-47s and other weapons, they clash with security forces and rival groups over access to the lucrative gold that's hidden deep in these shafts. Johannesburg is a city defined by extremes: the rich and poor, the powerful and the powerless, the safe and the dangerous. From the Rolex gangs, who strike swiftly and disappear without a trace, to the long-established prison gangs like the 28s, to the armed zamas staking their claim in the mines, Johannesburg's criminal landscape is diverse, unpredictable, and, at times, terrifying. Now, Let's shift our focus to Cape Town, South Africa's most famous tourist destination, known for its stunning landscapes, iconic Table Mountain, and pristine beaches. But behind the postcard images lies a much darker side of the city, one that many tourists don't see. Cape Town, particularly its Cape Flats region, is home to some of the country's most violent gangs and a high level of drug trafficking. While many visitors flock to the city for its beauty, it's crucial to understand the gang violence that plagues certain neighborhoods, often hidden just beyond the glitzy tourist spots. Unlike Johannesburg, where gangs are often fragmented and operate in smaller, opportunistic groups, Cape Town's gang culture is far more established, with deeply rooted, organized criminal factions. The Cape Flats, a sprawling, low-income area of the city, is dominated by violent gangs such as the 28s, 6s, 7s, and the infamous Hard Livings and Americans. These gangs control significant portions of Cape Town's poorest neighborhoods, including Manenberg, Lavender Hill, and Nyanga, which have some of the highest crime rates in the country. These neighborhoods are often seen as war zones, with gang-related shootings happening on a regular basis. For many residents, life in these areas is a constant battle for survival, with many living in fear of random violence. The gangs are deeply embedded in the community, their operations focused on drug trafficking, extortion, and territory control. Unlike Johannesburg, where gangs are more likely to target the wealthier suburbs or engage in opportunistic street crimes, Cape Town's gangs are more focused on bigger ventures, often managing entire neighborhoods, drug trade routes, and even illicit businesses. In Cape Town, the gang leaders are often public figures like the late Mark Liffman, who was assassinated, and Nafis Modak, larger-than-life characters who are known to both their communities and the authorities. They walk freely in the streets, surrounded by their loyal followers, and are sometimes even seen as heroes in their neighborhoods. The notorious Hard Living and Americans gangs, for example, have charismatic, well-known leaders who have almost become household names. Their influence extends far beyond criminal activities, with some even engaging in charity work or other public endeavors to further their status. Contrast that with Johannesburg, where gang leaders are often far more elusive. The bosses behind the 28s or zama operations tend to stay in the shadows, hidden from the public eye. Their power is more covert, controlled from behind prison walls or through quiet influence in local criminal circles. In Cape Town, however, gang bosses are sometimes viewed as almost celebrity-like figures, publicly known and at times even respected in the areas they control. When it comes to safety, Cape Town is certainly not immune to crime. Visitors are strongly advised to avoid certain neighborhoods, especially at night. The Cape Flats areas like Manenberg, Lavender Hill, Nyanga, and Khayelitsha should be avoided, as these are hotbeds for gang activity and violent crime. The violence here often spills over into nearby areas, making them risky even for locals. That said, Cape Town itself is a popular tourist destination, and the city's central areas like the City Bowl are still relatively safe, especially during the day. But even in these areas, crime can be an issue. Areas like Long Street, known for its vibrant nightlife, are not completely immune to theft, muggings, and petty crime, especially after dark. It's important to be aware of your surroundings, especially when walking around in tourist-heavy zones. For a safer experience, stick to the more affluent areas like Greenpoint, Sea Point, and Camps Bay. These areas offer some of the best views, top-tier restaurants, and entertainment. They're also among the safest neighborhoods for tourists to explore, but it's always advisable to use an Uber or a taxi service after dark rather than walking the streets on foot. So while Cape Town offers stunning landscapes and a world-class tourist experience, it's important to stay vigilant and informed about the realities of gang violence in certain neighborhoods. Whether you're in Cape Town for business or pleasure, always be cautious. Avoid the high-risk areas, stick to the safer parts of the city, and as always, be mindful of your surroundings. Next, we're heading to the coastal city of Durban. Famous for its stunning beaches, vibrant Indian cultural influence, and the bustling atmosphere of the Golden Mile. But while Durban's shoreline attracts millions of visitors each year, there's another side to the city that travelers need to be aware of. Just beyond the tourist hotspots, Durban faces significant challenges with gang violence, poverty, and a history of drug trafficking that has shaped some of the city's more dangerous areas. Outlying areas like KwaMashu and Inanda, located just outside Durban's city centre, are often overshadowed by the more glamorous parts of the city. But these areas have long struggled with poverty, high unemployment, and gang violence. It's not uncommon to hear about violent crime, including shootings, robberies, and turf wars between gangs. While Durban itself remains a popular tourist destination, these areas present serious risks, especially for visitors who aren't familiar with the city's more dangerous zones. Durban's central business district, CBD, has also fallen into disrepair. The area is densely packed, with narrow alleyways and rundown buildings creating a haven for petty crime, making it an ideal distribution hub for criminal activities. It's a chaotic blend of gang-related violence and economic desperation. While Durban's gangs are less structured compared to the heavily organized groups found in Johannesburg or Cape Town, they are just as dangerous. In fact, many of Durban's criminal groups operate more fluidly, often forming temporary alliances or working in smaller, more localized networks. Despite this lack of formal structure, Durban has a deeply rooted drug trafficking issue that has been around for decades. Over the years, Durban has been the center of South Africa's drug trade, with the city becoming a key point for both local and international drug trafficking. Police have frequently uncovered massive drug labs in the surrounding areas. These drugs often make their way through the city's complex network of gangs and distribution points, fueling further violence and criminal activity. The gangs in Durban are involved in a variety of criminal activities, from extortion and drug trafficking to robbery and violent street crime. Local gangs, such as the First Avenue Gang and Red Gang, have been particularly active in places like KwaMashu, and they often clash over turf and control of the lucrative drug trade. Fortunately, the South African Police Service has been ramping up their efforts to combat Durban's crime problem. Recent police crackdowns have led to a significant increase in gunfights between law enforcement and criminals, and the authorities have had notable successes in taking down drug labs, arresting gang members, and reducing some of the violence in these areas. However, much like Cape Town and Johannesburg, not all of Durban is dangerous. There are plenty of safer, tourist-friendly areas like Umhlanga, the Golden Mile, and Durban North that are perfect for sightseeing, dining, and relaxing. As long as you stay in these areas and avoid the crime hotspots, you should be able to enjoy your trip. While these locations are some of the most dangerous in South Africa, it's important to recognize that the country as a whole offers much more than just crime statistics. South Africa remains a top travel destination, known for its wildlife, culture, and spectacular scenery. However, as in any country, it's essential to take safety precautions when traveling, whether you're visiting a big city or heading into more rural regions. Always do your research ahead of time, check local crime reports, and listen to advice from trustable locals. Stick to well-lit areas at night, avoid displaying valuables, and if you're unfamiliar with an area, consider using a local guide. In conclusion, while South Africa has its fair share of dangerous places, it's also a country of incredible beauty, resilience, and warmth. With proper awareness and precaution, you can experience the best this remarkable country has to offer while minimizing risk and staying safe. Thanks for watching, and hey, hit the subscribe button for more.